Welcome to Counterpoint, an ARPA podcast. We are three ordinary men who love God, God's Word, our families, the church, and our country. In this podcast, we seek to bring a reformed, biblically faithful perspective to social and political issues in Australia. The Association for Reformed Political Action, also known as ARPA, is an Australian organisation which aims to keep you informed about social and political issues in Australia and encourage a Christian voice in the public square. Hello, I'm Nathan, and once again I have with me Ben and Sean.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, it's a beautiful morning. Sun shining, I think, outside.
Yeah, more or less.
Yep. And it's another month, so we have another current events episode lined up today.
What a month that has been.
Yes. We don't really have an issue coming up with topics, that's for sure. Now, two of the topics pretty much have already been promised. Yeah, we saw them coming in advance. So one, we're doing a somewhat belated, although probably still quite timely, overview of what's happened with the federal coalition leadership. Yeah, those who are in the know would know that the Liberal and the National parties both have a new leader now. So we'll quickly go over that and a little bit of what's happened. And yeah, maybe speculate a bit on what's happening with the coalition. I'll try to keep it short. And then the South Australian election, I think it happened about 2 weeks ago, so now the results are in. So Ben will have a look over that. And this was basically the first litmus test for One Nation's popularity. What's happening? Do we still have a two-party system, or is it something different? And we'll go through that. Basically, yeah, the answer is, it looks like we're in a three-party system now. And then Sean will have a look at what's going on with the price of fuel. I think this is something that everyone probably would have noticed and be aware of.
Yeah, if you have a car at all, you would have noticed something happening.
So yes, fuel seems to be the new toilet paper. So we'll go through that. Now, one thing we do want to do when we start is always look to God and remind ourselves of who God is. And I think a good place to start this one is Daniel 4. This is actually Nebuchadnezzar speaking. Daniel 4, verse 34 and 35. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honoured him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" So yeah, a good reminder that ultimately God is in control. God's kingdom is everlasting. And even the most powerful of kings, Nebuchadnezzar was at the time. Yeah, God can humble them. He places them where he wills. He also directs them whatever path he wills. Yep. Such comfort.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so we'll start off with federal coalition leadership. I'll be introducing this one, so yeah, you have to listen to me for a little bit longer.
We'll try and jump in where we can, Nathan.
Yeah, it'd be good to hear from you. So yes, the federal coalition at the end of last year, we were looking at the opposition leader being Susan Lee, and I guess you can say the deputy, David Littleproud. He was the leader of the National Party. The Nationals, I think they are actually. But now we have two new leaders. Angus Taylor has taken over for the coalition, for the Liberal Party, and like 2 weeks, I think, after he had announced that he was staying on and he was fighting as leader, David Littleproud suddenly resigned, and then Matt Canavan was appointed as the leader of the Nationals. Just quickly, from a Christian point of view, Matt Canavan seems to be the best guy in the Nationals Party. He's generally promoted Christian morals with a few exceptions. And yeah, he's been strong against net zero, strong for small government. So Yeah, I think that's good news for the leadership there. The coalition finally seems to be getting the message that the reason why voters are leaving them is because they've left the voters. They've left their conservative values and trying to be wishy-washy. Like Susan Ley, she hadn't even developed policies yet. They were in a 1 year figure out our policies period at the time. But Matt Canavan's already come out strongly, and Angus Taylor, I think, as well, like pro-productivity, small government.
I think that's really frustrating, actually, from the previous leadership, is that I think the issues are clear, and you can't come into a leadership position of a political party not knowing what it is that you need to do. So it's actually just, well, it's sort of the writing is on the wall for you if you walk in and say, okay, we'll take a year to look at this. Like, yeah, you're not going to last. There's no time to sit back and relax and see how we go here. You know what the issues are. You know what the people of the country are struggling with. And depending on what your let's say presuppositions are, you know what the solutions are. And put that on the table. If people like it, they'll move forward. Otherwise, you'll get out. But she didn't even give herself the opportunity to do that. So, a bit disappointing. But for her anyways, it's probably a good outcome for us, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, my thoughts in regards to Susan Ley was pretty much, she seemed to be more of a puppet.
Yeah, stand in for the real leader to come later.
Yeah, there seemed to be no chance that she'll be the Liberal leader going into the next election. But that doesn't mean she shouldn't have done well.
Yeah.
And she's also quit politics. So, yeah. The optics aren't very good. It's just like, well, they don't like me as leader. I guess I'm out. So her seat's actually up for re-election. I think that will happen in the next couple of months. And that's going to be the second litmus test of One Nation's popularity. Another thing we've got going on in the Liberal Party is you pretty much have two factions. You've got the moderates. They call them the wets. They're the New South Wales and Victorian elements of the party for the most part. And then you have the conservative side. And the problem is you have a lot of division going on, I guess, in terms of what sort of policies you're promoting. The moderates are pretty much, I guess you could say, your liberals. So anyone can do what they want. In social politics, they pretty much stand alongside Labor. So that's bad news for Christians. So for instance, they're part of the progressive train.
Yeah, and then ironically, so that's probably what's caused the people to be driven away from the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
That's sort of those sorts of people, I'd say, or that sort of faction in the party, because if you're going to be doing Labour but just soften it a little, people know that. You can recognize a fake from a distance. So you'd rather want the real authentic thing, right? So you'll go for Labour. So you're driving people away from the party. So it's just... Anyway, so that's something that they'll have to figure out. You can't have slightly more conservative than Labour and then people that are actually looking to be conservative in the same party. It's probably not going to last long.
Yeah, and I think at some point we'll actually look at what's gone wrong with the Liberal Party from a Christian point of view. So we're not saying this is the reason why voters are leaving them, but from a Christian point of view, this is why. Yeah. This is how they're compromising on the principles that we agree with. Yeah, and the issue is that though there's a lot of top-down control. Liberals meant to be a grassroots party, but there's a lot of top-down control. Susan Ley wasn't actually the popular pick in her seat. She was more of a committee appointment. So that's one example. So yeah, Angus Taylor will still have to deal with that. And in fact, his deputy leader, Jane Hume, is a social progressive. So yeah, bad news in that sense. There's still that element in the party. And I think just to quickly wrap this up, one thing he has done well, I think, is his appointments. He's appointing people where they're good. So he's got Tim Wilson, okay, social progressive, but Tim Wilson's strong in economics. He was, I think, part of the IEA, the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is a think tank. He's been appointed as Shadow Treasurer, so someone who knows what he's doing there. Angus Taylor himself is strong in economics. He has an economics degree and some, I think, from Harvard or some prestigious university. He's got some awards from there. And Matt Canavan as well actually has a master's in economics. So hopefully that's good news for the economy.
Yeah, hopefully. And
then Andrew Hastie, he's been talking about manufacturing and strategic resilience for a year now. So he's got that portfolio. And we're seeing Matt O'Sullivan as well, focusing on early childhood. And this is very, very good news too. He's actually from WA. He's a Christian. And so there's high hopes that we'll see a pushback against all this funding going to childcare centres and more support for parents actually raising their own children.
Yep. Yeah, and hopefully that coupled with the economics side, that they'll look at how to take pressure off households as well.
Yeah.
Because of taxes and that sort of stuff.
And by the way, if you didn't think that the funding for childcare centres has gone over the top, we were driving out of Mandurah yesterday, and there was literally a fuel station that had been converted into a childcare centre.
Yeah. Oh, there's childcare centres popping up everywhere.
We've got now in our area, and we won't go too long on this, but just down the road from us, it's a new development. They've got on the one corner, so just imagine a road and then a T-junction road coming into there. On the one corner, there's a childcare centre. Across the road, childcare centre, and then on the other side of the road, there's a nursing home for the elderly. It's like, like I said, I don't have a problem with a nursing home for the elderly, but it's just two brand new childcare centres. The one's just being finished off now. The other one just opened up in January, right across the road from each other, and both of those are within 2 kilometers of at least another 3. So it's there's definitely some good funding going there.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll focus on this when we're talking about family a bit more as well. Hopefully it's not like America where pretty much you're getting lots of funding and no children in the centres.
Well, I was just about to actually make that comment. Say at least the childcare centre is going up. So that's already one step in not the right direction, but at least the money is being used for what they said it was going to be used for.
And in another positive move, hopefully positive, the coalition are considering income splitting as a tax policy.
Okay.
Which would be fantastic. So basically, if you have children, so husband and wife can pretty much combine their incomes. What's good, split it up in half for tax purposes, which more than halves your tax bill for income tax. That would be good.
Yeah, that's one of those incentives that could actually help. Yeah, in a real way help families and probably also motivating people to have more children. And that's part of another problem that also needs to be addressed. So
yeah, bring back the baby bonus. Yep. Okay, now as we move on to the next one, so you'd hope that Matt Canavan, he would take the opportunity especially as a new leader, to focus on what Labor's doing wrong. The Nationals can offer something that's better. Look, there's lots of low-hanging fruit really with the current government, and we'll get to that with the fuel crisis too. It's not hard to argue against what they're doing. But instead, it seems like he's more worried about one nation. So as we move on to the South Australian election, well, maybe he has good reason to be.
Yes, he certainly does. So March 21st, we had the election in South Australia. And yeah, this was one of the first times where some of the polling from One Nation has been expressed in actual votes. So if you kind of have your ear to the ground a little bit, you might have noticed that over the last year there's been a bit of noise regarding the increase in the polling for One Nation. They've started to become quite a popular party. And that didn't really this was the first litmus test for that polling to actually result in some seats. And it certainly did. So Labor in South Australia, they still won 34 out of the 47 lower house seats, so 72% majority, far and away a majority in the lower house. Liberals got 5, and One Nation got 4. And then Independents got another 4. So One Nation in total polled over 21% and beat the Liberals. They got 19%, and it's their strongest result at any federal or state election in Australia since the 1998 Queensland poll. So, yeah, this is a big win for the One Nation as a party. It really does echo some of obviously it echoes the polling, and it has serious implications for what will happen in South Australia. It does mean for the upper house, the Labour has 36%. One Nation has 24%. So there were only 11 seats up for re-election this time around, and the current members were already 5 Labour and 4 Liberals and 1 Green. So after the election, the overall makeup is that Labour has now 10 seats, Liberal has 6, and One Nation has 3. And then Greens now have 2. So the Greens picked up 1. And what it means is that Labour they're going to have a bit of trouble because Labour still needs 11 in order to get a majority. And so they're going to have to talk to at least somebody, either Greens, One Nation, or Liberal in the upper house. So yeah, this is quite an event. It's a solidification of the direction that Australian politics is seeming to go in, where we are seeing, as Nathan was saying earlier, kind of the Liberals have gone left and now sit slightly further right of the Labour Party, and as a result, most of the kind of blue collar, a lot of mining, a lot of trades, a lot of standard blue collar Australians are looking for political representation, and they no longer feel that they're finding that in the Liberal Party anymore, and they have turned to One Nation instead. So yeah, if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that there's a lot of situational irony here, because in South Australia, the Liberals helped push through some changes which would actually make it harder for the small parties in terms of how the funding gets distributed. So they've basically cut out big donations, so trying to keep Clive Palmer out, and also the floor, how many votes you need to actually gain access to funding, that's been raised. And then the next election, so this was something that Labor and Liberal, of course, they both agreed to. And the next election, One Nation picks up more votes, therefore more funding than Liberal.
Get wrecked. Oh, dear.
Yeah, but I think what you're looking at especially is just the difference between, a party which is a small party but with a strong message, consistent message for years. Now, we're looking to that, I think, in another time. We don't have the time now, whether or not we agree with what One Nation's messaging is. But you're looking at the fact that they have a cause for what's going on economically, why people are struggling. That they have a reason. It makes sense to most people, and they also, at least they say they have solutions.
Yeah, they have a strong vision, and that is like Sean was saying earlier, that's what you need. You show up, you have a strong vision, then if the people like it, and the people do like it, obviously, you'll get somewhere.
And I think the people are liking it because it's interesting that the demographic is like blue collar people, right? Because they are the no-nonsense people. They're the people that are much more difficult to fool in a way. We were reading The Emperor's New Clothes the other day, again with the kids, and it's the higher ups that are fooled for not fooled, but are they are fooled, I guess, in the story. But it's the normal people on the ground doing the work, the ones that are actually the major contributors to the economy that are affected by a lot of these bad policies.
Yeah.
And it's them that feel the crunch a lot of the time first or the most, because they're in a sense carrying the country when it comes to the amount of taxes they pay and so on. So it's interesting to see that happen.
Yeah, in a lot of ways you're looking at the people who are working.
Yeah.
But they're carrying things because they're doing the productive jobs too in general.
You shut down a BP refinery in Kwinana.
Then guess what?
Because of net zero.
Yeah. But I'd say these are also the people who, like the simple arguments will attract them. Well, they should probably attract most people.
Yeah.
But it's just like, look, all this stuff about net zero and solar panels and that, but we're finding it harder to live, to make ends meet.
Yeah,
So
you're
what's
telling
going
us
on?
we're moving towards utopia, yet everything's getting more difficult. How is this happening in a way? So
yeah, quite the sea change, which is, I would say, currently occurring in the Australian political scene. We will keep an eye out over the next few elections. We have Susan Ley is stepping down from her seat after as a federal member, and so that will be the next by-election that tests the question of where One Nation sits. And then we have obviously the general election, which is coming up, I believe, later next year. Is that correct?
For New South Wales, I think New South Wales and Victoria both have an election within the next year or so.
So
Now Victoria is an interesting one. We'll get to that at some point.
And I was just thinking, it's so. This is in a way, not in a way. I think it is a positive thing, just generally. But I think we were talking about this on Sunday, Nathan. Is that we probably maybe at some point it would be good to just dig into One Nation a little bit and just show that even though they stand for a lot of the same things that we would stand for as well, it's not that they're a Christian party necessarily. I'm not saying that there are no Christians in the party. I'm just saying that they do a lot of good things. I like some of the tactics that they use and so on, the ridicule, and I think that's a very powerful tool, especially in this cohort of the society. But yeah, do they is it going to be a Christian way of ruling, or is it just they're very very conservative? They are in a lot of ways cutting with nature, but it's a godless type of cutting with nature, or is it actually more of a Christian sort of thing? Anyway, but that'll require like an episode where maybe we can just look at that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, and I think the word you wanted was satire.
Yes.
yeah, ridicule, satire.
Ridicule, satire. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's more satire. Hopefully, anyway. Yep.
Yes.
So I think the questions we have coming from here, a lot of it is actually, how are One Nation going to deal with the popularity they have? They've always been a small party, outspoken, but now you're actually dealing with the fact that, hey, you've got a lot of seats in Parliament. How are you going to make it count?
Yeah, this is the key, is that now you have actually got to wield the power. So it's one thing or at least some of it, right? So it's one thing to talk a big game and it's one thing to poke fun at everyone else while you're on the outskirts. But now you're in, or you're starting to really be in, and you have at least some say in what happens around the table. And that is a whole nother ball game than just talking about it to the press.
Yeah.
So we will see.
Yeah, you're going to have to come up with policy and that sort of stuff. And what do you call it? Like, there's a difference between outlining a principle and saying, no, we should cut immigration, and actually doing it.
Yeah.
Actually coming out with policies that will affect that.
Yeah. So this is going to be the big test for them, as you said. It's easier to to lob bananas and tomatoes from the cheap seats, but when you're actually in there, can you now do the thing? Can you show that you're serious, and can you show that you can do it in a proper, respectful way, and not just try and take the same tactics into the chamber, but actually show that you're someone to be taken seriously? That's going to be critical here, is not to waste this opportunity. Similar to, I guess, a good example would be like Marika here in WA. She hasn't used these tactics, but she's gotten in there. She's been granted the opportunity by God, and she's showing that she's doing really good work and pressing on the important things, showing she's someone that they need to now deal with, and she's formidable in that sense. So it's important for One Nation to do that here in South Australia, and then that will pave the ground for the elections coming after.
Yeah.
To be taken seriously.
Yeah, from what I understand, at least in WA, it's a very strong Christian flavour. Okay, 3. Sean, is there a fuel crisis? What's going on?
No, it's all fake news. Everything's fine.
Okay, cool. We're done.
Yes, I guess as we mentioned earlier, obviously there's been this, about a month ago now, isn't it, that the war kicked off in the Middle East?
Yeah, end of February. So just over a month.
And that's obviously had quite a substantial effect on especially in Australia, a lot of other countries as well, with fuel supply, trying to get crude oil out of the Middle East to the refineries. Australia is quite reliant on refineries in the Southeast Asia, and they get a lot of their their crude oil from the Middle East as well. Not as well, they get it from there mainly, or a big percentage of it. So that's caused some shortage in Australia. It's also exposed the fact that we don't have enough reserves in the country as well. we're supposed to, according to the agreement that we're part of, the international standard is 90 days of fuel supply stocks. And it's, I think a few weeks ago already, it was shown that we had like 36 days worth of fuel, which is just a bit alarming, considering that you have the biggest industries in Australia is farming and mining. The one puts food on your table, the other one, you could probably manage without for a little bit, but it's one of the big economic things that brings a lot of money into the country.
I'd say that the economy can't actually deal with mining cutting down either.
No, probably not. But you can't. The mine can't survive with their own food. So
yeah.
So it's probably farming first and then mining, but both are pretty critical for Australia as industries.
Yeah, and those are the two that have been most affected by this, haven't they?
Yeah. So this is the thing, right? So a lot of the mines, not a lot, I think pretty much all of them would have their own tankers and so on site where they would store thousands and thousands of liters of diesel to try and protect themselves. But at some point they need to buy again, and then they're going to buy thousands and thousands of liters or they continuously have trucks driving up there refilling the tanks and so on. And a lot of the, I guess for the farmers it might be a little bit different. If you're not a big industrial farm, you might not have your own tank. You'd be relying maybe more on a local service station or whatever. Or you maybe have a small 500 or 1,000 liter tank maybe bigger than that, but a couple of thousand liters on your farm itself. But yeah, it doesn't take long for those big vehicles to chew through that diesel, right? So they need to be topped up every so often. And once the pressure starts coming, people do, that the one thing that they have been pushing is, there's actually that the shortage is not really real. It's just people panic buying and all these things. And obviously there is a level to where people have been panic buying, which is understandable. If you're a tradie or even, again, a farmer, or the mines are not that big a thing because it's mainly big industrial companies, right? They've got agreements with the fuel suppliers and they send the trucks up there. But for the farmers, it might be more personal. So it would, you could understand them going out and trying to fill as many cans. Well, they probably won't have cherry cans. That's not going to do much. But you try and keep the tanks filled regularly. So there is that's real. But then there's also the fact that the Strait of Hormuz has been, the supply coming through there has been hampered, and that is gonna have an effect. And in Australia itself, we don't really have our own. We've got 2 refineries left. We had, I think, 8 or 10 20 years ago, and they've been systematically closed since the early 90s. Where now there's only 2 left, and they can hardly process what we get out of the ground here. And that is mostly, or largely the reason behind that is actually the environmental standards of the fuel that you produce. So the sulfur content, the refineries we have here, because they have not been, because of the government's environmental policy over the last 30, 40 years, becoming stricter and stricter and stricter, these refineries were not kept up to date with the latest technology on reducing sulfur, all that sort of stuff. So the refineries we have here now, to get them up to that sort of standard, the latest standard, is just cost too much money. So they're being subsidized now by the government just to keep them running, and the government has actually delayed pushing down these lower sulfur numbers on them for a period to give them a bit more time. But ultimately, that's part of the problem. Is we can't get the right fuel mix out of our local refineries because of a lot of it is to do with the environmental standards for the fuel. So then we end up whatever crude we do get out of the ground, so mainly on the offshore, all gets exported to Southeast Asia, or most of it gets exported to Southeast Asia and gets processed there, and then we buy back the fuel from there. So it's one of those things that's with the global economy, it's a bit of a self-inflicted injury, but we're not alone, right? A lot of countries have done that over the last 60, 70 years. But it exposes another, again, this thing where you're relying way too much on players outside of your own country. You can't look after yourself sufficiently that if something like this happens, and it happens, we spoke about it just before we started recording, something simple, it could be a war, or it could be like the Suez Canal where a ship just gets stuck there and now suddenly you're stuck, right? And that's just not, it's not good. It's not a good way of operating a country. It's not all purely about money. You have to also think about looking after your own needs. And it comes down to our military as well, right? We can't even, if you run out of fuel, now suddenly your military don't have any fuel anymore either. So it's not a good situation to be in. So
So Sean, what you're saying is that the complete totalization of the worship of Mammon is not actually a good decision for your country to engage in?
when you state it like that, it's very obvious. Yes.
Where
Yeah.
literally every decision is based on how do we do this the absolute cheapest way possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the frustration. Is you have to look at as a government of a people, you do need to get past this purely economic view of things, or sorry, purely money driven, because economic is exchange. But it's look at where it's put us now. It's the toilet paper situation again.
Yeah.
So it's
But there's elements where it's not about money.
yeah.
Because if you
Yeah,
look
then
at,
that's zero. Yeah.
well, why are costs in Australia higher? And one big component is regulation. So
Yeah.
government control, trying to control what you do, like pushing net zero or environmental controls, things like that. Now, a lot of this stuff's good.
Yeah.
In the sense that, you don't really want your rivers going dirty.
Yeah, it's very good. The problem,
Yeah.
the whole problem is that we just offshore the responsibility,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So now you can't take responsibility for the fact that you're taking crude out of the ground, and you can't refine it in the way that you want because there's just too much sulfur. So we'll ship it somewhere else. They'll refine it, and then we'll buy it back,
Yeah.
and that will solve
We
the problem.
impose this standard on ourselves, and we actually can't solve the problem ourselves. We need to now get other people to do it. It's just
And look, I would agree. Like, if I love the fact that we live in one of the cleanest countries in the world, right?
Yeah.
Like, all the more power to us. But we should actually bear those costs ourselves instead of offshoring that, so that other countries have to then have all the pollution while we get to live in a
the
Yeah.
hypocrisy of that is just
And look, and you can refine it in Australia without affecting the cleanliness of the country.
not to this quite to the standards that
not
they
to
want.
that.
Yeah, maybe.
That's part of the problem. So one of the short-term solutions, we did say we might get to that as well, is that if the government does relax some of this regulation, even if it's just temporarily, then the refineries we could use more of what they output locally ourselves. But keep in mind that their output is such a low percentage of what
Yeah.
we need.
Yeah, 20%.
It would help, but it's not gonna. It's a very short-term and crisis sort of situation, maybe to build up your emergency stock now, especially for military and farming, mining, as we said. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where we're not saying that we need to be isolationist, but I think you do need to also put your own people first. Make sure that you can look after yourself first. And again, it's about creating jobs, creating industry. If you refine everything here yourself, there's a lot of benefits to that. You're creating jobs. And again, if you get past some of this regulation and so on, it can be more cost effective. Because the problem right now is the two remaining refineries we have can't run without government subsidy.
Yeah.
And that's a problem as well, right? That means it's not a viable business, and they need to figure out, and I'm not saying that they don't know, but we need to figure out, why is that? We use a lot of fuel in this country, and we do have some oil, we're selling it, or we're getting stuff out of the ground that can be used for fuel or refined to become fuel. So what's the problem here? Why is this not a viable business? We're using so much fuel in our country for so many different industries. Why is it that when we refine in our own country, it's not a viable business? How is that possible? So what is the problem? What is actually the core there? And I don't know the answer to that question. It might be environmental. It might be a combination of different things. But I don't know. Just not a good thing. But anyway, as a short-term solution, they could relax the regulations, even if it's just temporarily, maybe for the next 12 months or so, and then you can maybe buy more of your locally produced fuels to raise your own emergency stores or whatever.
Yeah, and I think just a couple of other things to set more context. So Australia has stocked up about, let's say, 36 days of strategic reserves or fuel reserves. Now, this was actually worse a few years ago. I think in the previous government, it basically came out that we have none, and then the government bought fuel and stored it in America. So slowly they're working on it, and now we're at the point where I think it was stored in Australia. So it's better than it was, but it's still not good enough.
Improving, yeah.
It's not just the Labor government that's at fault here. It's every federal government for the last, probably 40 years now.
Yeah. Yep. Since the 1979 oil crisis, where this exact same thing happened and was the reason why we made this rule.
Yes.
Are you saying we didn't learn anything or we forgot?
We forgot. But that's
literally,
the thing.
The last time there was conflict in the Middle East, everyone was like, literally all the countries got together and they're like, okay, whatever happens, we just got to make sure that we have enough fuel so that if this ever happens again, we can deal with the war and then get through it.
Buys us time to...
That was the Iranian Revolution, wasn't it?
We'll be fine, no worries.
Well, that's pretty much what's happened. Especially in the upper class in Australia, amongst the elites, there's been such a complacency. And I don't know why or how, but people seem to have forgotten that reality exists. But yet dealing with the fact that they've bought into the idea of the end of history. So the world, after the Cold War ends, the world's just going to be peaceful. Look, America's so powerful that no one's going to even threaten them. As soon as they say, you're doing the wrong thing, everyone's just going to come in line. Everyone's going to be one big happy family in that sense. So we can send our manufacturing offshore, we can send our processing offshore, we can even send, let's say, the mining or the getting the oil out of the ground. We can rely on everyone else because the world's going to be peaceful. It's going to be fine. And I would say in recent history, this is actually the second time this is being found out. The first time was the COVID disruptions. And that wasn't fuel, but that was other things. Like the price of housing went up big time, partly because the government poured money into it, thanks to unwise schemes. Yeah. But the other part is because the supply chains were disrupted due to closures in ports. And then we said, no, we're not allowed to have Russian timber, for instance. So that means a big segment of the timber industry or your timber supplies are cut off. Yep. And that's why we talked about fuel as toilet paper. Like if that wasn't a warning that we need to actually build up a bit of resilience, the stuff that we can't get, we make sure we have a good supply of in our country. If that wasn't a warning, well, this is warning number 2.
And there's some ironies in this story, but the greatest irony of them all is that we actually manufacture locally 80% of our toilet paper.
That was great. Yeah,
that was all panic buying. That was
I think that was actually panic buying, but yeah.
And I think we should say, like up until this point, the fact of the matter is, before that gas actually gets into your tank, there is, I don't know exactly how long the lead time is, but it's probably at least 60 or 90 days, right? So the fact that prices have gone up so much here is almost certainly a lot to do with the supply shock, the demand shock, not the actual supply shock. Yeah. So I think
the price of crude oil going up as well. So that's the worldwide price of oil. Yeah, that affects our fuel prices, and that I don't think that only goes up due to supply and demand. It also goes up due to risk, I would say. And in this case, as soon as this happens, you're like, okay, 20% is cut off. All of a sudden, people will be like, oh, we need it. Yep. So that is demand, I guess, then. But it's due to that shock.
But we should be clear. So there is this demand shock. I think people have bought probably about 1.5 to almost 2 times as much as fuel as they would have usually bought in a regular March. Yeah. And so, if you're running a just-in-time delivery system, of course, you're going to have supply shortages. And that is always going to affect the smaller time players first, which is why you see in a lot of remote places, these smaller gas stations, which don't have large wholesale deals with the suppliers, they run out first, right? Yeah. So that makes sense. But the actual supply constraint, which is the closure of the canal, 20% of the fuel.
Strait of Hormuz.
Not the Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. And the restrictions by Southeast Asia, that is still coming down the pipe. And that is real, but it's probably a bit overblown, could be, I would say.
Yeah, so the way that you said That's really interesting. So now the question is, should we expect then that the prices are going to slowly start coming down again just because the panic buying has slowed? Yeah, interesting. I don't know. We'll have to see what's going to happen with that.
The thing is that we haven't actually seen the results yet, as Ben was just saying.
No, that's but that's the interesting thing, is that's always the question, right? So
Yeah.
the war starts, and they talk about, okay, that's now closed, so we're struggling to get some of the fuel through.
Yeah.
But immediately the next day, the prices start going up.
Yeah.
And that's as you just explained, Ben. That's because the demand going up because of the more people buying more. But now we haven't even yet seen the effect of the higher prices or the delay in supply or whatever. We're gonna see what effect that has only in the coming weeks.
Yeah, because I watched a video by someone who looks at logistics around the world, shipping, and he said, I think 11th of April. That's when the deliveries from before the war. That's when the last deliveries will happen, and then after that, that's when you'll see the effect. So I think Ben was telling us just before, China have stopped fuel exports. Yes. And Australia imports a third of our jet fuel. So this is the aviation industry. That's a third of that's imported from China. We're going to have to find somewhere else.
Yep.
Yeah. And we're going to have to pay later prices if we do find it.
Yep. And that's the thing, is that you will almost certainly be able to find fuel from somewhere at some price, right?
Yeah.
So people who need it will be able to buy it. It's just the question of the price.
Yeah. Yep. And then what does that do? Well, another thing, we could talk about this for ages.
Yes.
But we just want to talk about some things which have happened. The Reserve Bank, they see what's happening. They say, oh, inflation, because the fuel prices are up. So they've also increased the house prices. Well, the cost of living in a house, because they bumped up the interest rate.
Yep.
Now, I can understand why they do it, but the problem is they're a hammer. They see a nail. So I don't actually agree with what they've done there, but I'm also not an economist. But the problem is it's just made things worse. It's doubled down. So people's costs are going up because of fuel. And it's an unavoidable cost in a lot of cases. You have to drive. And now all of a sudden, double whammy. The Reserve Bank also makes it harder on your One Nation voters. But that's the demographic we're talking about. We're talking about the middle class. Yep. The lower middle class who are really struggling. And actually the poor, I'd say.
The other thing to keep in mind as well is that while you can have a demand shock where people go out and suddenly they fill up all their jerry cans and all the farmers fill up all their tanks.
They buy jerry cans too.
They buy all the jerry cans and fill them all up too. You can have a demand shock, but you can also have a demand destruction. And that is where people decide that they are not going to go to Esperance because it's just too expensive. They're going to pay like $1,000 worth of diesel, right?
Yeah.
Or more, right? And that's where a lot of people can suddenly start to decide to say, I'm not going to book that ticket, or I'm not going to drive to that remote location in WA because dragging my caravan and my boat all the way out there is going to be too expensive. So think about the fact that there are a lot of moving pieces to this, and I don't think we should hang on to your hats, basically. Don't go out there and
don't panic.
Get too crazy. Filling up too many jerry cans.
Yeah. And in terms of what the government should do, I think number one, apologise. It's like, we've been complacent. We've sat in our laurels for too long. Now this has happened, and we apologise. We messed up. And then, look, to get through it, we're probably going to have to make some hard calls.
Yep.
As long as it's true. As long as what's happening is true. Like, there's so many conspiracy theories that you wonder, is there an oil price shock, or is this people pushing the net zero agenda? But I'm not going to buy that.
Yep.
I think it's real. So based on the reality that, look, the farms need diesel, the mines need diesel, the government should be like, that's what we're prioritising. The people who need it to keep food on the table, keep the economy going, they'll get first dibs.
Yep. And don't be afraid also, like when people start talking about rationing, when you get into this cycle of panic buying, where people are like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get any. So then they go out and buy a whole bunch, and then the doomer prophecy is revealed or is fulfilled because there's no
self-fulfilling prophecy.
They don't get any fuel because everyone has gone and bought it up, and now it's sitting in their shed or in the back of their car.
Yeah.
Like, I tell you what, people driving around with a full tank of fuel and a jerry can in the back of their just regular car is just not a good idea. Like, this is a fire hazard, people.
Too much.
But the issue is more diesel anyway, more so than normal petrol.
Yeah, but unfortunately that message doesn't make it across, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if you've got a car and it runs on fuel, then you're storing it somewhere.
Yeah, not all fuel is equal.
But anyway, if you have this cycle of panic buying and it's not actually related to anything which has happened yet, then you really do have to just say to the people, look, you can only fill up your tank as much as you need for this week. And that's called rationing, right? People don't like the word rationing, but that is what it is.
Yeah.
Is to say you're only allowed to get a regular amount of fuel, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is probably what will happen. WA has declared a state of emergency.
Yeah.
Now, at this stage, they are just using that to get visibility into, as far as I understand, it's just to get visibility and to see what the fuel situation is, basically, in these different storage facilities. But it could very well be that we do have rules around you're not allowed to fill up your 4x4 and your
boat.
3 extra gas tanks.
Well, this is so there's maybe one extra thing to add is that maybe in this current situation for let's say the next 3 months you make public transport free. I mean, it's not quite honestly, it's not that expensive as it is today. But let's say just until this thing sort of calms down, make public transport free. As Nathan was saying, you prioritize especially the diesel to those that need it to keep the economy going. And then if you do ration it, is there a possibility that you could say, okay, we're going to ration it, but in doing that, the fuel price needs to come down. So you negotiate maybe with the fuel supplier saying, well, remember that you're not buying fuel at a more expensive price yet, or you haven't yet, or tell us how you're getting to that. Because right now, if it is, and I think the way you explained it, the panic buying with demand going up, that's the thing that's driven the price up. It's not because getting the fuel was more expensive. It was because there was a higher demand. So if you reduce the demand again and the price comes down to $2 a liter or something like that. Now, I'm not saying they should force it. I'm not for price capping, not necessarily in that way, but to say, yes, we're going to ration, but also it's going to drive the price down.
The other thing, too, is that, remember, price gouging is illegal. It is already illegal. There's no extra rules that needs to be applied there. It's just if there is price gouging happening, then you need to report it.
Yeah.
Well, the government are really looking into that.
Yeah.
And
they are.
But
Which
the
is
problem
good.
is I suspect they're trying to find a scapegoat. Because I think a big part of the reason the price went up is the price of crude went up. Now, okay, it happened too soon because generally the price of fuel follows the price of crude about 2 weeks. This happened immediately.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, what they're looking into.
And the other thing is just that, so
Have to get
again,
litigated.
and we understand that the value of something depends on the demand, so I understand that part. But if you're not buying crude oil from someone, but you're just you're drilling into your own soil and you're pumping it out of your own soil, then coupling the crude oil price of that oil that just came out of the ground today versus yesterday, and yesterday it was $30 a barrel, and tomorrow you can charge $100 a barrel, even though it's come out of the same soil, same pump, everything. But because in the Middle East something happened, now you can charge 3 times more for people locally.
It's a crazy world, man.
It's an insane. I understand.
That's the global economy.
How it works. It's just it's crazy to me. I don't because a lot of countries that do drill oil themselves, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Even though you don't, you're not buying the oil from anyone. You're drilling it out of the ground here, yet suddenly now you could charge your people locally 3 times the price.
Well, that's because you could sell it internationally for that price.
I understand, but this is it's what you just said, the global economy sort of thinking.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, we need to look after our own people, good for us. We're not buying oil from anyone else. No. We can stick to $1 a liter and you guys have to pay $5 a liter. Just goes to show, hey, doesn't it? But no, what do? We screw our own people too.
We will actually continue this sort of discussion when we're looking at future. A big part of that discussion is going to be national resilience.
Yeah.
Making sure that, at least as a government, we can ensure that the people have what they need so that we can deal with shocks in the world, around the world.
Yeah.
So in terms of what more the government can do, listen on in a couple months, maybe a bit longer, we'll be talking about it.
Once we get finished with family in the next
Yeah.
2 years,
Yeah.
we'll.
That's it.
Yeah. So it will be coming. But yeah, basically as a general rule, we should be looking to build national resilience. I'm not going to advocate for autarky. People have tried that. It's gone badly. Autarky is basically where you close yourself off from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
We do need to rely on external sources for some of the things that we have, but we should really be looking to build national resilience.
Yep.
And this is going to take years, decades probably, to do
Yep.
because we've let it slip.
Yeah, well, the decisions to start doing it was also made decades ago.
Yes.
So you can't expect to overturn it overnight.
Yeah.
However, we do have established industries already. So I don't expect that it should take as long as it did maybe to get to here where we are now. You could probably make a big change quickly.
Yeah.
Within 5 years or so, you can make a reasonable change. But yeah, it's going to take a while.
Anybody want to start a business?
Well, we have to deal with the regulation problem as well.
We're going to talk to Andrew Hasty.
Yeah. He's all in favour.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's more the decision makers. Okay, now we were on track to get this done in 40 minutes. And then we talked about fuel.
Yes. Well, we were all fueled up
Yes.
to talk about it.
But I think, we're dealing with something which, as you'll find out, I think, when we talk about future, there's so much connected to what's going on. We're talking about decades of negligence. Okay, well, thanks a lot for listening. I'd just like to say, before Ben closes off, please, if you have any topics that you want us to discuss, if you want to hear more, if you really want us to go down the and open up the can of worms that is the war in Iran, which we're not planning on doing, but if you really want it, please let us know. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah, any comments you have, any feedback, or topic ideas, any questions.
Yep.
We'd love to hear from you.
Yep. And that's at arpacounterpoint@gmail.com. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. And yeah, we'd like to see you on the next one.
And as always, our prayer is that God's kingdom will come.